I had a lawyer in Pennsylvania. He's out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, very interesting guy. His name is Lou Capozzi. Italian guy. Back then, he had a ponytail. I used to actually go to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania sometimes, and he has an old ranch. It's probably from the turn of the century. And he has what he calls the barn house, like a guest house. I used to stay there sometimes. He was all proud that he would go to Wegmans and he'd buy Gabilla's potato commissions and say, I want you kosher, let's put it on the grill. But I stayed in his house a few times. He ate, very colorful guy. He had a still, he was making his own vodka, his own moonshine, as Gold would call it. But anyway, one day, the other players in the story, I'll give you a little preview of the story. Shimmy took over a bunch of facilities. Those facilities were under a guy by the name of James Kessler. James Kessler, just to tell you who this guy was, James Kessler's mother was a Yid. His father's questioned whether he was a Yid. And in our office, whenever we'd have a minyan, there was always a shiloh. Do we count them? Do we not count them? I always argued, yeah, why not? As long as a Yid. But we had a lot of Litvish guys who were like, what do you mean? This is a schmatzer. This guy's married to a shit, so he's not, goes to church. How can you count them? He always had a complaint, this James Kessler. What was the complaint James always had? He said the yarmulkes always get the big jobs. Me, I never seemed to go up. He was the head of all of our therapy, but he felt like all the guys with yarmulkes always become in charge, not him. That was his complaint. Yeah, real complaint. That was his complaint.
Sure he wasn't wrong.
Probably wasn't wrong. I'm not going to deny it. Anyway.
This is not being recorded, is it?
It could record it. I don't care. It's like I'm not saying anything that didn't happen. These are real names and real true facts. I get a call from Lou Capozzi one day. Lou says to me, he says, there is a facility in Germantown, Pennsylvania, owned by the nuns, the Carmelite sisters. And I want to know if this is something you want to pursue. I said, I pursue anything. I mean, like, why not? He says, well, I could arrange a meeting. You know, he's dealing with the church. Are you interested in a meeting with them? I said, yeah, why not? Okay. I tell James, I said, listen, James, I'm going to Germantown, Pennsylvania next week. You could be the token guy this week. He looks at me, like, what do you mean? I said, what do you mean? You say you're a guy, I say you're a Yid. I'm going to the church, you could be the guy. I said, I've never been there before, you'll guide me. We fly into Philadelphia International Airport, we drive to Germantown Avenue, 6445, is that the address?
6544.
I'm pretty good. How many years has that been there? I think it's 6445. I think I'm right about that. I think I haven't been in the building since 2007. Anyway, so we pull up in front of this building. It's a huge building. It's, I think five or six stories. And it's kind of like a V shape. And in the middle, there's a steeple, church, with like a 2-story high statue of Yashka with the cross and everything. And I'm like, oh man, this is a disaster. I pull up, I go, am I going to go into the church or something? Like, I can't do this. I'm sitting in the car, I'm like debating, should I? I say, no, I'm not going with my yarmulke. I don't take off my yarmulke. I don't have to take off my yarmulke. Why should I take off my yarmulke? I take my yarmulke, I put it down in the armrest, I said, I cannot go in there. I don't know. So James turns to me, and it's very important that you guys listen. Every word I say is the words that were said. Don't try to interpret it. My Hebrew words are different, that it was said differently. I'm telling you word for word. So James turns to me and says to me, Steve, what are you doing? I go, what do you mean, James? This is a church. You see the Jesus thing over there? I can't go there. He says to me, but you can't change who you are. I'm sitting there like, okay, you're right. I can't choose right now. Okay, fine. I'll put my yarmulke on. I'll go walk in. Maybe we won't go into the church. I don't know. Maybe the lobby's different. Okay, fine. We walk inside. I walk into the lobby. There's a reception on the right. And Lou Capozzi's waiting there. James is with me. And I go, who are we meeting? And I never said this name before because she died 2 years ago and I was not allowed to say names. He says to me, we're meeting with Sister Fidelis Regan. There's another one, Sister Mark, Sister Lauren, another one I don't remember. Anyway, I said, okay. Tell the receptionist we're meeting with Sister Fidelis Regan. and Google the names, you'll see. Sister Fidelis walks to the front. She's wearing the, the whole nun outfit and everything. Mama, alta babashka, walking, Yeah, anyway, come and shake hands. Come with us now. It's very important to understand that. Not actually not. And I'll tell you why in a minute. Not that I did a particular or anything, but I'll tell you. What happens is, listen.
This isn't recorded, right?
We'll edit this.
We already verified that before.
You have to understand, between 2000 and 2010, there was a big push in the nursing homes all over to change out the old fluorescents that were dimmer to brighter, newer lights. So this building was older in that sense, so it was a little dimmer. So we're walking down this hallway anyway and make a turn into a conference room, and there's these 3 other nuns sitting there, and she introduces us, and we sit down on one side of the table. Where I'm sitting is standing is, let's say, where the Sister Fidelis was sitting, I was sitting, my brother sitting, and on the other side there's these 3 nuns sitting like, not saying a word. We sit down, she says, before we have meetings, we like to pray. I'm like, of course, sure, pray, pray, whatever. We start a meeting. 2 hours we're talking, healthcare, this, that, what we do, how we do, buildings, this, all the shticker I were talking. She turns to me after 2 hours and she says to me, so, who are you? I said, what do you mean? I told you, healthcare, this is what we do. And I'm thinking, she goes, no, who are you? I'm thinking like, this is like a yeka question. I'm like, okay, this is where the meeting is going to end. In my mind, I'm thinking this is when it's over. I go, well, what do you mean? She goes, well, are you Italian or Polish with your name, Bogomilski? I said, well, originally it comes from Belarus. And she's like, and what religion are you? And now I have to answer. I'm like, Jewish. And she says to me, I did, but I'm taller. If you look at me right here, my hair's brushed back, my hair's thick on my hair. Then you didn't say it. It's a brown yarmulke. Like I said, it was dim, the dim, older, Anyway, she says to me, are you Orthodox? I said, yes, I'm Orthodox. She says to me, where's the yarmulke? Oh. And at that point, my heart's like, and I'm like, right here. She goes, I didn't see it when you walked in. You're taller than me. I didn't see it. I said, yeah. She says to me, we have an Orthodox medical director. His name is Dr. Pomeranz. And sometimes he goes to work volunteer in emergency rooms. And in the morning, he comes to his office, and I know he puts on his towels and tefillin here. I'm hearing this, I'm like, I sat there, I go, I don't understand something.
You said
yarmulke. Every word I said is the words. I said.
You said talis, not talit.
No,
Right.
straight out.
Yeah.
I said, I don't understand something. I've met with people who are not Jewish. You're telling me the yarmulke, talis, tefillin. She says to me, I didn't always grow up like this. I only got married to God. They wear a ring. She says to me, I only got married to God when I turned 50. I'm like, and before? She goes, well, I was a regular person. She says to me, I grew up in New York. She says to me, you have an accent, sounds like New York. I go, yeah, I'm originally from New York. She says to me, I grew up in the Bronx. I said, my great-grandparents, my grandparents actually lived in the Bronx. She says to me, when I grew up in the Bronx, all my friends were all Jews. I was even what you would call a Shabbos guy. And then they all moved away because, the blacks moved. She says to me, that's
gentrification.
1 second. This is white, Irish, Catholic.
Reagan?
I'm talking about the king of white privilege in our terms of today. She says to me, then the blacks moved in and the Jews moved out. So where did your grandparents move to? I said they moved to Williamsburg, and then eventually when they built the BQE, they moved to Crown Heights. So I said to her, do you know where Crown Heights is? She says to me, yes, I know where Crown Heights is. She says to me, isn't that where the Rebbe was from? I said, yes, that's where the Rebbe was from. She said to me, the Rebbe was a great man. She said, you would expect me to tell you John Paul was a great man, which he was, but I'm telling you now the Rebbe was a great man. She said, turns to me and she says to me, did you know the Rebbe? I said, look, I'll be honest with you. Me, I'm young. By the time I was already of age to be in any relation with the Rebbe, God was so big at the time, couldn't really have a personal relationship. But yeah, I mean, there was events. She goes, did your parents know the Rebbe? I said, yes. She says, tell me a story about the Rebbe. I said, fine. Tell you a story. So there's witnesses here. After my brother was born, sometime after my brother was born, my mother had a miscarriage. And my mother went to a few doctors after, and the doctors told her she shouldn't have any more kids. She went to 3 doctors, according to what she told me. They went for the Yechidus on their anniversary. They didn't mention it to the Rebbe because 3 doctors said you shouldn't have any more kids. As they were leaving the Yechidus, the Rebbe said to my mother, don't listen to the doctors, something to that effect. So my mother tells it, she says that she turned to the Rebbe and she said, I don't know what you're talking about. And the Rebbe said, don't do the surgery the doctors want you to have. So she said, you always say go to 2 doctors, and if they disagree, then go to a 3rd. I went to 3 and they told me the same thing, so you have to give me a reason. So the Rebbe turned to my mother and said, because you're supposed to have another son. And I said to her, I'm that other son. So she turns to me and she says to me, I want you to know this is better than business. From a business perspective, we're going to be good. She turns to Lou, screams at him, get rid of your ponytail, you look dirty, slimy first, and clean yourself up, you're not a good guy. She turns to the other nuns, I swear this is going on just like this. She said, they don't know what we're talking about, I'm telling you this is better than business. To me, I'm in the twilight zone. I don't know what hit me. I've met with many different people. I've met with freaks in the middle. I laugh at some of the stories. I had to meet in a Cracker Barrel one day. I had to meet on the side of some road in Leesburg, Florida with this Meshuggah, Castleberg and his family. Crackpots. This is like the strangest one I've ever met. Strangest meeting. Anyway, she tells me, you know, we own 22 nursing homes. 20 in the United States and 2 in Ireland. And every so often we travel to Ireland to visit the 2 facilities we own there. And they have a mother house out of Germantown, New York. If you look up the Carmelite Sisters, you'll see that's where they're based out of, Germantown, New York. So she said that every once in a while we leave, we fly to JFK, we fly to Ireland. Germantown, New York, yeah. It's up on the Hudson.
This is Germantown, Pennsylvania.
This is Germantown, Pennsylvania, yes.
This
This is Germantown, Pennsylvania, Germantown.
Germans are everywhere.
So we fly, she says, the story I'm going to tell you, David, she says to me like this, the story I'm going to tell you happened about 20 years ago, this was in 2006, I figure in the 80s. She says, we leave JFK, we fly to Ireland in the morning, and when we land over there's a priest that we're very close with, and he picks us up, we're older people, he takes us to his house, we stay at his house a few days, we visit, we go home. So it happens to be on this time we went out there. We landed in Ireland, and we went to his house. It was in the morning, at breakfast. And he said, I have to go take care of something and pray. And she said, I walked by his office, and I see the door is cracked open, and he's sitting there wearing a palace and tefillin. She said to me, and this is why it's important, you understand all the words she said. She said, I grew up with Jews. I have a medical director who's Orthodox. I know what palace and tefillin is. I'm a little bit perplexed and sharp. So I wait till he finishes and I go over to him quietly and I say to him, I don't understand. You're a priest. You're a priest and you're wearing a palace and tefillin. Now he wasn't the head bishop or anything, regular guy. So he says like this, he tells a story like this. He says, for the past 6 months in my dreams at night, I have a dream. And this guy comes to me in my dream with a white beard and tells me I'm a Jew. Says, I know my history, I'm not a Jew. Says, I don't know what to do with myself. I ignored it. He says, one night I couldn't sleep. I turned on the TV. And I'm changing channels, one channel after the other, one channel, boom, boom, boom. All of a sudden, I turn on the channel, and the guy in my dreams is on the TV screen. And she says, it was Hanukkah Live. And the Rebbe was talking that on the 5th night of Hanukkah, you could find in the deepest, most hidden places the light, and find the soul. He says, at that point, I was like, this is something strange. This is a little too much. This isn't coincidence. He says, I looked into my history and I found out that my parents were actually Holocaust survivors. And they're dead now. I don't know what, when, where, but my assumption is they saw so much suffering, they decided to raise me as a non-Jew. And here I am today, and I know my heritage, I'm a Jew. I turned to her right away, excited, and I said, you gotta tell me his name. I gotta know what the guy is. She says to me, his secret's gonna go with me to the grave. And you're not going to publish this story till I die because I'm a high member of the church.
Come on.
A high member of the church. She's very high up in Carmelites. This is the bells. So I said to her, she turned to me and she said to me, I told you before that the Rebbe was a great person. I also told you that John Paul was a great person. But John Paul didn't get into the dreams of people on the other side of the world. She said the Rebbe did. So I said to her, that's a pretty incredible story. I said, did you ever want to meet the Rebbe after that? She said, I actually did. She did. She said she went. I said, did you? Right away I was thinking, like what you're thinking, which is, let me scroll through the gem pictures, find the nun. She said, no, I have a lot of respect. I know. I heard he gives out dollars. I went on the line and I dressed regular, so I have no idea what, when, where, what years. I'm not going to start even looking. But she said to me these words. She said, I went for $1 to Rebbe. The Rebbe gave me $1, and then he smiled at me and he turned to me and he said, here's $1 for Ireland. And she said, I was floored. So when I knew, when you told me where you're from, and you told me a story about the Rebbe, I said I could do business with you. She said, now I want something from you. I know there's no biography of the Rebbe. I know about all she knew about every political book that existed out there. She knew Shaul Shimon Leitch's books. She knew Jacobson's books. She knew all the books that were out there. She said, I know there doesn't exist a biography. I want you to, your homework for the closing is to bring me a biography. Okay, I printed from here and there. I put something together. I bound it, and I did do it. I'll tell you about the closing. You'll get a good laugh out of it, CJ, in a minute. But anyway, she tells me like this. She says, all the crosses and statues that are in the facility have to stay with the facility because the residents there, this is their home. I said, without a question, listen, we understand that. We don't run religious facilities. One of the things she asked me in the meeting, she asked me, what's the mission going to be? I turned to her and go, sister, if you ask me if it's going to be kosher, the answer is not. It's not going to be kosher, because it's a nonprofit. But I left there at this meeting with James, and I'm telling you, it's 2 witnesses, James and Lou Capozzi. And we walked out of there, and James turned to me, and she goes, I don't know what the hell happened in there. But somehow you and her hit it off, and crazy. I walk out of the meeting, I call my partner, Laser Shiner. I tell him, Laser, we're getting the deal. He says to me, are you nuts? You knocked off a deal in 1 meeting? It's not possible. I said, Laser, it's the craziest thing that ever happened in my life. I said, we have to buy it as a nonprofit, so we were busy with Rabbi Sushar and Gateways then. So I tell them she wants to meet with the rabbi who's going to be on the board, that we're going to take it over. A week later, we go back to Germantown, Pennsylvania. Now it's me, Laser, and Rabbi Sushar. Rabbi Sushar comes in, all sophisticated Rabbi Sushar from South Africa. He's here, and he's going to speak with a very fancy accent. And he walks in, and Laser says to the nun, straight out, so what's the deal? She says to him, I don't understand the question. What do you mean, what's the deal? She says, Steve told me that we have a deal. She said, are you sure you want to do a deal with us? She says, I told him I'm going to do it because of the Rebbe. He almost hit the floor. He didn't know what hit him. He turns to her and he says to her like this. So let's talk numbers now. How much do you want? She says, well, the appraisal's for 9.6. If you somehow make it happen, we're good. So he says, how about I give you 7.6 and we'll buy you receivables for 2 million and your payables, and somehow we'll make a wash and we'll pay for 7.6. She's like, I don't care. 7.6 is good with me. 9.6 is good with me. Same thing. We made it work. The bottom line is we bought this crazy building. Now here's the craziest story, gets crazier. So the building was they built this building in the 1950s, these nuns. It was a 96-bed nursing home. It was 5 stories what it was. And then in the 1980s, they built another building, the same parallel to it, of 171 beds. And the 96-bed assisted living facility, the 96-bed old nursing home became an assisted living facility. So before we closed, it was operational. For some odd reason, before we closed, they closed down the assisted living facility.
Whoa.
So now, we're going to be stuck with a huge 5-story empty building. At the same token, I get a call from Nathan Stern. You know, Nathan Stern at that point ran all of our billing and started running like facilities in Pennsylvania for us. Nathan calls me up and says, I don't know what's going on here, but there's a truck here with movers and they're taking down all the crosses and the statues. I don't understand what's going on here. What's coming? What's going? I call her up. I go, Sister Fidelis, I don't understand what's going on. We made a deal that the crosses and the statues are staying. Why are you taking it? She goes, come on, Steve. You don't really want that garbage. That belongs to the mother house. We're taking it. I go, if you insist, you can take it. You know, I'm not going to argue with you. She says, this is good. Let's leave it alone. I said, fine. This is 2 days before the closing. It's ridiculous. But anyway, we close on the deal. We go up to Germantown, Pennsylvania. Massive property on the Hudson. We bring in a whole buffet of food. You know, we can't do anything without food. It goes without saying. We bring in about 15 Hasidim from Square. And try to imagine this in like the mother house of the nuns. You can't imagine this craziness. We make a minion there. It was wild. With pictures with her. Anyway, the whole thing, we closed the deal, signed the contract, and paid. Anyway, we take over the building, and all of a sudden we realize we have this 96-bed, 5-story building that's empty. What are we going to do with it? In Pennsylvania, you cannot get a new license. It doesn't exist, the moratorium on licenses. The only way to get licensed beds is if you take them from an existing facility and move them to an existing facility that's up to current code, which is impossible, pretty much.
This is both for an ALF and for a nursing home?
Beds. We move nursing home beds.
Okay.
The class
So-
of nursing homes is next week.
So I found a guy who has this guy, Fountainhead, he was selling 15 beds or something, so 15 beds is worthless for me. I was up in SeaWorld.
Why did she do that? She couldn't.
I don't know, we don't know why. We didn't ask her.
No, but it almost sounds like she's taking down crosses.
Blown up the deal.
Yeah.
No, she didn't blow up the deal because we closed down. We didn't realize what happened until after. We didn't really care, honestly. You don't want the ALF. The ALF's a burden. You don't make money on it. But
Okay.
we just figured we'll figure out what to do with it. I get a call. I was up in
You said it's a dog for
SeaWorld. In SeaWorld? SeaWorld has another park. We go swimming with the dolphins.
Discovery Cove.
Discovery Cove. I'm in Discovery Cove. You know, I'm putting on my wetsuit. I go swimming with the dolphins. I'm like, back then it was as heavy as it was now. You know, I had it for many years. I was skinny. And I'm like, and all of a sudden my Nextel, remember the Nextel phones?
Yeah.
The flip ones? My Nextel phone rings.
In the suit?
Yeah, it was next to me. I wasn't in the water yet. I was getting there. I pick up the phone.
Everyone's
Laser
so-
calls me up and says, I heard the Presbyterians are closing a building. It's called 59th Street. Ironically, it's 58 beds on 59th Street in Pennsylvania, in Philly. I think we should call them up and try to get their beds. I go, Laser, I'm about to swim with the dolphins. He says, I'm telling you, get up. You can't stop until it gets you, right? So I say, no, okay, fine. Give me a few minutes. Found this lady on the Presbyterian board, looked up, and I called up and I said, listen, my name is so-and-so. I know you're closing your building. I'd like to talk to you about buying your beds. We're not interested. We're shutting down. We don't care. I go, listen, lady. You're talking about minimum back then, $10,000 a licensed bed. I mean, $600,000 you're walking away from. You sure you don't want to even talk? She said, look, we're not stopping anything. We're continuing to close the building. If you want to come up, I can arrange a meeting with you on our board this week. Come up. So I said, great. I went swimming with the dolphins, of course. I finished that. I flew up to Pennsylvania, and I have a meeting with this Presbyterian board. Presbyterians are different than the Catholics, different attitude, different everything. Anyway, I'm in this meeting, and one of the board members says to me, I don't understand something. Under Pennsylvania law, you have to move the beds into an existing building that's up to code. Where are you moving the beds into an existing building within this certain radius from our building? I said, I'm going to move it to Caring Heart Manor. She goes, how are you going to move it to Caring Heart Manor? I go, what do you mean? We bought it. The guy looks at me, he's like, you bought it? I said, yeah, we bought it. Well, why are you so surprised? He's like, because they wouldn't even sell to their own Catholics. They wouldn't sell to us. They sold to the Jews? I'm like, yeah. The guy's like, well, that's great. That's pretty wild. How did that occur? I go, well, it's a pretty strange story.
So he told it.
So the lady says to me, the head of the board, the president says to me, yeah, I'm all ears. I want to hear this story. Because we tried very hard, and we offered them a lot of money. I go, how much did you offer? They offered over $10 million, and they didn't get it. I'm like, okay. I don't want to tell her how much we paid for it. So she says to me, I tell her the story. I noticed that this president was like in shock of the story. So I said to her, tell the whole story.
I thought you swore it's on the woman's life.
Our names. They knew that who the people were running. I didn't say names. I said what went on. I'm allowed to tell the story, not names. I wasn't allowed to say names. So anyway, I tell the story, and she says to me, can I talk to you? I said, sure. I'm thinking to myself, she's Jewish. Here we go again. I walk into her office. Behind the desk, she has like a Enzo and everything. A million pictures. Kids, this, that. She reaches in the back and she pulls out a picture of the Rebbe. And now I'm like, okay, are you Jewish? She says, no. My second husband is Jewish, and he told me that I should keep a picture of the Rebbe here for good luck. She says to me like this, if you could do a deal with them, then I'll make a deal with you. We paid to keep the building open for 9 months till we brought our building up to code, with one patient and an administrator and a director of nursing, because we required that by law. And I paid them. They were the happiest people. We made a deal. I tell the story because the irony of the story is, we always say, Gedol HaTzadik v'Misosim v'Chayeyim, that Tzaddik is greater in death than in his life even. That this was one of our most profitable deals we ever did in our lives. And it was like the most strange thing to pull off a deal so easily. And without a question, when she said I did it because of the Rebbe, that was a pretty wild statement to hear from a nun. And I've repeated this story many times. If you hear it from the Mashiachistim, they'll tell you that Melech HaMashiach made miracles and they don't want to deal with me and stuff like that. Those things didn't occur. That's not what happened exactly. It's very different. They changed the story quite a bit. What I'm telling you is exactly the story how it happened. And to me, it's a pretty awesome thing because of an experience that I experienced. And it's not like I experienced when the Rebbe was alive and someone could say, oh wow, the Rebbe was alive, so mindful. This is real experience, first time, and first hand. I'm giving you people who are witnesses, you can go and ask them. And they know it's the truth. So I want to share it over here. I want some chayim to everybody here.
Chayim.
The Rebbe was a person who loved every single Jew, no matter who they were, no matter what they were, no matter what their background was, how they approached God. And that's the beauty of who the Rebbe was and who we are. And who I like to go in that footstep. Love every single Jew, the way he is, how he is, and he should love himself.
Virayna, virayna.